Happy Friday, everyone. John Lorden here with another episode of BrainScratch. Hope you all had a nice week. Thank you so much for joining me here today. Today's case is a bit of a mix between a Searchlight and a BrainScratch case. Essentially, it is the case of a missing person, but one of the investigators that's working on this case has been pretty clear that he believes that this is indeed a homicide case where we basically don't have the body. Now, I had done an episode of Searchlight a few months ago, the Where is Sam Davis interview that I had with his mother, Carol, and someone left a comment on there. Her name was Rosalind Paltauf, and she asked, please do an episode for my sister, Roxanne Paltauf, missing from Austin, Texas since 2006. I started looking into this case and I realized I already knew it. And I think I might have researched it before, possibly to cover it, and probably because it was in that space of me not feeling like it was a traditional Searchlight, but it wasn't quite either a full BrainScratch. I think I didn't know what to do with it. But today I've decided, you know what, it's time to help raise some exposure to this. And I have to tell you guys, after looking through, there's a lot of video segments. I'm going to have a ton of video links in the description box below for you guys, so you can really dive into much more video on this as well. But just seeing all the work that Rosalind and her mother have put in to keeping exposure raised to this case for 12 years now, just really motivated me to try to help them in some way. So that's why we are going into this case today. And on top of that, we've just got a very compelling mystery, some of the logistics around the timing of her disappearance and what the last person to have seen her does right after that, raise a ton of questions. And I'm looking forward to sharing all that with you guys and getting your feedback on that as well. So with all that being said, we are going to start really quick with a video clip. Here you go.
It's hard to keep my sister's story alive, so I reach out all I can, and I encourage people to be aware of their surroundings and to say I love you to their loved ones every day.
Okay, well, we got to wrap up.
Obviously, that was just a quick clip of Rosalind being interviewed by Fox 7 out there. And let me also just put out there, Rosalind, I'm pretty sure you're going to see this. If you want to come onto the channel and do an interview to give us more insight, more details, I've already started a list of questions I would love to run by you. Please get in contact with me. You can email me, John, John, at lordenarts.com, just like it's spelled in the channel name below. So today's case is going to be a little different because it's going to almost feel like a Searchlight, but you guys will see them. We've got some big concerns with where it goes from there. So we're going to start with the coverage at NamUs. We can see the profile here for Roxanne Elizabeth Paltauf, female, date of last contact, July 7th, 2006, missing from Austin, Texas. She was 18 years old at the time she went missing. She would now be 30 years old, according to our information here. White Caucasian, weighs between 115 to 125 pounds, 5'4" to 5'5" inches tall. And we're going to get more into the location. I'll actually show you a map and we'll talk more about that. But for circumstances of disappearance, they have unknown. Roxanne was last seen at approximately 8:30 p.m. at a hotel in the vicinity of I-35 and Runberg in Austin, Texas. And one of the big things that I struggle with in this case is that sighting. This is one of those cases where her boyfriend is the last person to have seen her, and they were arguing. And I don't know how much stock we really should be putting in that 8:30 time frame for being the last sighting, but that's just one of my initial concerns of many in this case. Brown hair, they're saying it's actually light brown, green eyes, a piercing. She's got double pierced ears and a pierced navel. She's got a quarter-size scar on her left knee, a mole on the right side of her neck. For clothing, she was wearing a pink or peach tan top, light blue shorts, and flip-flops, which is another weird thing about her walking off into the middle of the night. She did not take her purse. She did not take her cell phone. And the story about her ID is probably going to make a bunch of you shake your heads violently back and forth, just as I have. We're going to start over at True Crime Daily. I'm not sure if this is a rebranding of Crime Watch Daily or if this is their web component, but they have basically integrated the video that Crime Watch Daily has made along here. And I think this article is largely just a typing out of what is in these videos. We're only going to lean on it for a little bit here, but I need to get some of the details out to you guys. I have links directly to all 4 parts of the Crime Watch Daily stuff on YouTube in the description box below, so you can check that out after this video if you'd like. It's summertime in Austin, Texas in 2006, and the Paltauf sisters, Roxanne, Rosalind, Ronica, Ruby, and their mother Elizabeth can be found keeping cool at nearby Lake Travis. But when the July 4th weekend rolls around, her oldest daughter, Roxanne, asks to spend this traditionally family-filled holiday instead with her boyfriend, Lewis Walls. It's the couple's 2-year anniversary, so Elizabeth reluctantly agrees. When Roxanne returns from her romantic getaway, Elizabeth plans to take her eldest daughter and the rest of her kids on a shopping spree. Rosalind Paltauf states, "This was a Saturday. My mom spoke to Roxanne that Friday before, letting her know what time to be at home, what time we're leaving. After Roxanne's phone call with her mom, several hours passed. According to her family, Roxanne should be home already, but instead she makes another phone call to her mom, saying that I'm going to spend one more night with him and I'll be home in the morning. And I was kind of upset that she didn't just come home and we could have left early and gone shopping, but I said, okay, fine," said her mother Elizabeth. Roxanne said, "Don't worry, I will be there," said her sister Rosalind. Then Saturday morning arrives and Roxanne never shows. Roxanne's an adult now, turning 18 just 6 months prior, so they gave her some space and continued on with their Saturday plans. Quote, "We went ahead and went shopping that day, and we came back that evening, probably around 4-ish, said her mother Elizabeth. Then finally, a call from Roxanne's cell phone, but it's not her voice on the other line. It was Lewis on the line, and I was just kind of, 'Yeah, why are you using her phone? Why are you calling?' said Elizabeth. He goes, 'Have you seen Roxanne?' I said, 'What do you mean, have I seen her? She's with you. What's going on?' He said they got into an argument, that she stormed out and he tried to go after her, but she was too mad," said her sister Rosalind. So mad, according to Lewis, that Roxanne left the hotel empty-handed. Then Lewis goes on and says, "I have her cell phone. She didn't take her purse with her. I have everything of hers." That was last night, and here's almost 24 hours later, and you don't know where she's at, said Elizabeth. I immediately got in the car and went to that area. So for those of you who've been following Searchlight for a while, you know that this is a situation that we hear that comes up in missing persons cases. We've seen a few of those have outcomes where they are indeed homicides. And in those cases, it is usually the last person that has seen the missing person that is involved. So that's certainly the direction that this story is going in, but we've got many more twists and turns. Let's just continue with some of the information here at True Crime Daily. So they got in the car, they went out to that area, and this is another quote from her mother, Elizabeth. "I really didn't know the Runberg area until I started hanging out there trying to look for my daughter, and I realized how rough it was. It's not a place where you want your daughter. This is a neighborhood that's known for street crime, drug dealing, prostitution. Apparently, they even have very cheap motels that you can rent by the hour there." Let's go ahead and take a photo just so that we know who we're talking about. Here we have another picture of Roxanne, and this is Lewis, her boyfriend, that is standing next to her. Continuing over at charlieproject.org, just so we get a little bit of insight into both Lewis and Roxanne. Walls has a criminal record that dates back to 1995. Paltauf's mother didn't approve of Walls, and Walls' mother didn't approve of Paltauf, so the couple would usually go out to be together. Her friends also disliked Walls, who initially lied to Paltauf about his age. He told her he was 19 years old when they started dating. He was, in fact, 28. They had been together for 2 or 3 years by the time Paltauf vanished, and she often took care of his 2 children. One of Paltauf's friends stated she said Walls had hit her, seriously damaging her nose. Her sister also supports information about that story. Her sister basically picked her up from a bus stop where she got to see how bad her face was, and they had to do reconstructive surgery to basically put her nose back in place. He has a history of threatening other girlfriends, and at least 2 of them took out protective orders against him. Paltauf's family describes her as a responsible teenager who was devoted to her 4 younger siblings. She kept in daily contact with her mother, whom she was close to. She had dropped out of McCallum High School in her junior year, enrolled in job training, and was studying for her GED. She had passed all the sections of the GED exam except mathematics and had taken a second job. She dreamed of becoming a fashion designer. Her mother believes foul play was involved in her disappearance. It remains unsolved. Yeah, so basically the vibe I'm getting here is she stumbled a bit in high school, but she kind of came out of that. She was putting her life back together. She was really proud of having her own cell phone. It was her own contract that her cell phone was on. Her mother was talking about potentially getting a car for her if she would get her GED, and she was working on that. She had this one last test to get for her to complete her GED. And her coworkers at a florist place, actually, I think she was volunteering there if I remember correctly, just speak very highly of her and her passion for that work. She seemed to really love putting arrangements together as well. So it seems like this is a young woman that was figuring herself out, figuring how to maneuver in this world. And unfortunately, we have what seems like another life cut far too short. CrimeOnline.com. Her sister said that she saw Roxanne sitting at a bus stop several months before her disappearance and stopped to pick her up. After she got in, she took off her sunglasses to reveal a bruise she said she received accidentally during a fight with her boyfriend, her sister recalled. So there is kind of 2 versions of that story, and this is the one where it's kind of passing the buck in terms of his blame, that she basically got in the middle of these 2 guys that were fighting. This was a total accident. But then there's more direct quotes from her sister, and I believe from some of her friends where they said, no, in confidence, she basically told us that, that he hit her. And some of her friends suspected that there was bad things going on in this relationship for a while. It seemed like it was on again, off again for a period of time. As a matter of fact, it's even a little bit of a question of, was she possibly going to leave him or break up with him? Could that be motivation for him to have harmed her in some way? Let's continue at crimefeed.com. Elizabeth Harris called the police immediately. Since Roxanne was 18, though, the case wasn't treated as an emergency. Actually, there's another really big reason we're going to touch on by the end of this video that has me just really shaking my head. I don't know how this is happening in this area, but we'll get to that. Elizabeth also urged Lewis to phone the cops to provide more details. He waited a bit before making the call, which set off a potential red flag among investigators. Detective James Scott of the Austin Police Department took both calls. He spoke with Elizabeth first, followed by Lewis. From there, 5 more days went by before Lewis returned Roxanne's possessions to her family: her purse, her phone, her jewelry, and a bag of clothes. The clothing, however, didn't belong to Roxanne. They were some other woman's items. Really, really strange turn there, and I don't know what to think about it. I know some people I've seen on web sleuths talking about this think that perhaps maybe this guy was into trafficking. I mean, why would he have some other woman's clothes? And then how could he get that confused? I believe in one of the videos I saw, his comment, not that he's done any interviews, but what people say his comment was about that was he doesn't know what's her clothes. He just picked up everything that was on the hotel room floor and threw them in the bag. So maybe some other woman's clothes got in there. Actually, there might be a reason why part of that could be at least partially true, which we're going to touch on in this story as well. What I get concerned about is, did he use her clothes and that's why her real clothes weren't available, and then he was probably or possibly just trying to get it by the family by throwing in these random other clothes. I just worry that if he had disposed of her in some way, that maybe he had used the clothing to help facilitate that, and maybe that's why it wasn't available, or maybe there was evidence on it, or something along those lines. But the female motel clerk did back up Lewis's story, though. She said she saw Roxanne angrily leave the room, and that Lewis followed her, trying to persuade her to come back, but eventually giving up. The clerk said Roxanne ventured off on her own and Lewis returned to the room. Later that evening, the clerk told police she herself went to Lewis's room and spent time with him until the wee hours of the morning, in quotes. Some of the other coverage I've seen on this says that she didn't leave until about 3 a.m. Scott, the detective, said this makes him wonder if Lewis ever expected Roxanne to return at all. So this is where the story gets really weird, okay? I don't know how much stock to even put in this sighting, because I've looked at the layout of this apartment structure, and, you think of the clerk's desk, and a lot of us would imagine, it's, you have to pass by the clerk's desk when you're leaving the hotel. What if it's all built into the same building or something like that? That is not what we have going on with this apartment structure. I'm actually going to bring up a map so I can try to show you guys and explain it a bit better. Here's a photo of it actually from November of 2007. And you can see this building here. This is kind of the check-in and main office. But if we look at it from the top, let's see here. Budget Inn is right here. So here is kind of the check-in building. The actual parking and the rooms, from my understanding, are all in these two large buildings back here. This is not the inn itself. And there's actually another inn back here called the Austin Village Motor Inn. So even if you're looking at it from a street view, it gets kind of weird. Let me pull it to a more current one because there's more angles for us to look at. It gets kind of weird because when you look in the driveway, it looks like you're seeing the rooms right behind the office area back there, but you're not. That's actually a different place. So you actually, from my understanding, you can't see the rooms from the street. There's this building that's basically blocking it. So what I'm wondering, first of all, is how close they would have been walking to this. I mean, if Roxanne is really upset and she is leaving this area, how close is she really going to get to that front door? She has no reason to particularly go by this part of the building. And they're saying that she made a left when she exited out here. So that's actually a right from the direction we're looking at it from. My footpath, I'd be going, if I was getting near that building at all, it would just be at the back corner of it. And then I'd probably be cutting to this side as I walked forward to get to the sidewalk. So I don't know what kind of view this person has there. I have heard nothing about cameras. Does this even have cameras here? It might not, with the type of area that this is and the type of business that goes on at some of these hotels here. So I don't know, but I haven't heard anything about CCTV. It's one of the things I'd actually like to ask Rosalind about if we do get together for an interview at some point. But I don't know, guys. I'm really concerned about what could have been seen by the clerk here. Now, interestingly, according to one of the video segments I saw, they did polygraph test the clerk, and the clerk passed. So unfortunately, I don't know what questions they specifically asked her. I don't know. Just there's a lot of this that isn't fitting for me. The personality stuff that I'm seeing, at least from Roxanne's friends talking about Lewis. First of all, he doesn't seem like the kind of guy that's going to let her go walking off into the night. At least according to info from her friends, he seems a bit more controlling than that he would kind of direct her and kind of force her back into the conversation, maybe not even let her leave the room. And then when you consider what we're talking about in terms of the layout of this place, even if that isn't true about his character or his personality, that even if he would have let her leave, why is it all the way to the street that he decides to stop? I mean, assuming that they're in one of these rooms in these two buildings that's way back here, are you going to travel all that distance and then she just she literally says, F you, leave me alone. And then you just stop and say, okay, well, I'm just going to turn around, let her walk off into the night in this area that you know is pretty seedy. I don't know. The logic of all of this activity that's going on doesn't make a lot of sense. And then outside of that, what type of conversation do you strike up with the clerk where all of a sudden the clerk is like, hey, come on back to my room? And it doesn't happen immediately. From about 8:30 on into this night, he's using Roxanne's phone and just dialing the world. Apparently, he was just calling left and right. There are literally, I've seen screenshots of the records. I haven't seen the records for myself, but it looks like he's making phone calls literally every 2 or 3 minutes. He's calling ex-girlfriends. He's calling other hotels in the area, which I don't quite understand. He is calling sex lines. There's just a lot of strange activity going on with her phone that we know he's doing, and it starts from about 8:30 and it continues for a number of hours. And then at some point, this clerk comes back to his room. I would assume that the phone activity would die down around that, and it seems like they hook up in the room. So how does all that happen? I have no idea, but really the big problem in it is thinking from his perspective. Your girlfriend of 2 years that you're on this, trip of celebrating your 2-year anniversary with, you just had a fight with her. She goes walking off. She doesn't take her purse. She doesn't take her cell phone. All her clothes are left in the room. First of all, are you really going to start dialing up ex-girlfriends on her phone, sex line numbers on her phone? I guess I could actually imagine certain personality types doing something like that if they were really vindictive and wanted to kind of lash out at her. Well, you went away, so I used your phone and I called up my ex-girlfriends, blah, blah, blah. But then to go as far as the clerk that was working is coming back to your room and staying in your room until 3 a.m., that is what is one of the hardest questions to answer in this whole thing. His actions that are going on after this point, which are pretty much verified, are leading everyone to the conclusion that he did not expect her to ever come back. But it's not like we have any information from him that supports that. It's not like he told her mother when they got on the phone, oh yeah, she told me she was never coming back and she just ran off in the middle of the night and I don't know where she is, but I've got all her stuff. Do you want me to drop it off? That's not the conversation that really happened either. So it's really strange that we have this bizarre behavior going on after her disappearance. And then, of course, like I questioned when we were looking at the Namus profile, we only have his information to go on. Now, the clerk supposedly saw her. Like I said, I don't know how much stock I put in that. Could it have been that he could have gone walking up, acting like he was following someone out there, went into the clerk's office and said, oh yeah, my girlfriend just took off, even though he had actually done something or gotten rid of her hours prior to that? Could it have been some little theater thing that he set up so he could kind of create an alibi for himself or help shrink this time window? I think we need to consider that. I just don't have enough detail, particularly from the clerk, about what she saw. Did the clerk recognize the clothing? Was there, like I said, was there footage? Was there something really concrete that we could look at and say, okay, the clerk definitely saw her around 8:30? Because that part of the time frame is what I think is the weak part in his story. Unfortunately, after that, we have him on the phone. So we know that he's using her phone and he's dialing numbers every few minutes. So from 8:30 on, his ability to have done something to her or to do something to her pretty much disappears. And that makes me really look at that 8:30 time frame and say, where is the strict proof that we know that this is the start of this story? Because I don't think it's the start of this story. According to other articles I've seen, the last time that her mother spoke to her was about 4 hours prior to that. I think the time frame that we need to be discussing is the 4 hours between that time, 4:30 to 8:30. What's going on during that time period? What time did they get back to this motel? What was going on around all that? Where were they prior to this? There's a lot of questions in the time leading up way before 8:30 that I would love to ask someone that has information on this. So yeah, just Very, very frustrating case, obviously. I can't imagine what the family's going through with this. And it's terrible that the main source of information that we're looking to here, we can't really trust, because he's at least a suspect, if not the prime suspect in this case. Police checked the activity on Roxanne's phone, which had been in Lewis's possession. Almost immediately after Roxanne left, Lewis began making calls every 2 or 3 minutes, more than 300 calls in all. As a matter of fact, another thing that kind of strikes me about that, why are you making so many phone calls like that? First of all, the first thing I wonder is this some type of drug-induced thing? Like, are you all ramped up on something and you feel like you have to talk to people and you're making all these phone calls? The second thing I'm thinking is, are you trying to create an alibi for yourself, and you can't keep anyone on the phone long enough for that to work, so you're trying to talk to literally every person you can think of to get someone to stay on the phone with you for a while? Just a few thoughts that I had on that. Scott described Lewis's phone activity as calls to his other girlfriend in New Mexico and to 1-800-SEX lines. From there, Lewis stonewalled the police. Investigators had no probable cause to connect him to Roxanne's disappearance, which is really just... it's one of the most infuriating things. If this case had shoulders, I'd want to grab this case by both shoulders and shake them. It is just super frustrating that police have not been able to figure out a way to bring some level of probable cause here. But I get it. We don't have a body. We have a little bit of a history, potentially, of some physical abuse going on, but it's not solid because she wasn't really totally upfront with everyone about what was going on around that. Of course, we don't have any official records on that. It's not like she tried to get a protective order herself or something along those lines. I get why it's tough, but man, I wish something would break through on this case. 6 days after Roxanne vanished, a security guard happened upon a man pinning a local stripper to the ground, choking her, and trying to rip off her clothes. Upon noticing the security guard, the man took off, but left behind his hearing aid and his wallet. His name was Jeffrey Moore, and police knew him as a local lowlife who tended to get rough with prostitutes. And here is a picture of Jeffrey. I've read another description about this instance. According to that, he met this woman at a gas station that's just down the street. This is actually happening at a Motel 6 that is not at all that far from the Budget Inn. He asks how much for her to this woman that's at the gas station. She says, "I'm not a prostitute, but I am a stripper. I can give you a private dance if you want." Her husband is with her. They both get, I don't know if they get into the vehicle or if they follow him back, but they get to the motel. Jeffrey goes in with her, locks the door, locks her husband out, starts attacking her. The husband hears what's going on, goes to the front, gets the security guy. They come back, they open the door. Husband attacks Jeffrey, and Jeffrey goes running off. I believe Jeffrey is also deaf, so that is why one of his hearing aids is found at the scene. And then, of course, his wallet is also found at the scene. But something very strange happens around this. After bringing Moore in, police asked to see his ID. In the course of going through his wallet, Roxanne Paltauf's ID fell out of it into plain view. Now, I've heard all kinds of different variations on this story, but basically the main thing to know is that from his wallet, they find Roxanne's ID. Initially, Moore said the ID belonged to a friend of his and that he was trying to get it back to her. Then he said he'd met a young couple at a club downtown and they asked him for a ride to Runberg, where Moore said Roxanne dropped the ID in his car. A search of Moore's car, including DNA tests, turned up no evidence. He remains a person of interest. So now we've got two persons of interest. And by the way, the story about how he got the ID, I've seen so many different versions of it. I've seen that he gave them a ride to a dollar store. I've seen, no, he gave them a ride to a Walgreens. Then I've heard this version that they actually met at a club and he gave them a ride from the club back to where they were staying. So I'm not sure which story is right in all of that, if any of them are even true. I'm kind of doubtful of anyway. But what we do have is a very personal item of hers being found in a car. I don't know if she would regularly keep her ID in her purse. You know, some ladies like to take their ID out and just keep it like in their back pocket or something like that. So I'm not sure about it being separated from her purse, how important that is, but it being in his car, really important. And another aspect to this whole investigation that I haven't really seen good information on is what type of connection there is between Jeffrey and Lewis. Are these guys that know each other? Have they dealt with each other in the past? I really don't know enough about that, and there's just not enough information that has come out publicly around that. Also, I would love to know, first of all, I don't even know, does Lewis have a cell phone? I kind of suspect he doesn't, since he was using her phone for all those phone calls that he was making. But if he did police ever look into possibly checking those records, maybe trying to get a warrant to review those records? Jeffrey, same thing. I don't know if he has a cell phone at this time. If they do, if they're involved in illegal activity, there's a good chance it's a burner phone, so it might not be easy to find those records as it is. But a lot of considerations here. Investigators still have two persons of interest in the case, Lewis Walls and Jeffrey Moore. According to Detective Scott, these two individuals, they have something to hide and they're hiding it. I doubt not one bit that these two gentlemen are responsible for her demise. Now, I've seen other comments from her where he's basically saying at least one of them is responsible for her demise. Something else that's going on here, from what I understand, Lewis doesn't have a car. And she didn't have a car yet. Her family says that she would use the bus system to get around. So how they got to this part of town, how they were traveling, getting around, I have no idea. I'm wondering if Jeffrey and Lewis, if they knew each other previously, and Lewis might have been able to call Jeffrey for a ride to maybe get them around, or if Lewis had already done something with her, needed to dispose of her in some way, called Jeffrey, and Jeffrey helped facilitate that. There's even some question, and I really don't know how much to put into this, but there's some question about, was Lewis trying to groom her to basically pimp her out? And could Jeffrey maybe have been a client? Something went weird or wrong there. I don't know how strong of a theory that is. Because then you'd have Lewis and Jeffrey kind of at odds, and the way that the investigation has been about trying to get them to talk and the way that they've been responding, it just doesn't seem like they're at odds. It'd be this whole different thing if all of a sudden we heard that, Jeffrey wound up dead or something like that. Then I think looking at that situation might make a bit more sense. But it seems like there could be some coordination going on between these two guys. We just don't know what it is, how deep it is, how far back it runs. In March of 2014, we get an interesting twist. Austin police dig for remains, find none. The overgrown field is just 0.3 of a mile from where Paltauf went missing on the evening of July 7th, 2006. Since her disappearance, police have received nearly 1,000 leads, including one that came in roughly 6 months ago, and that led to today's excavation, a joint effort of the Austin Police Department and the FBI's evidence recovery team. According to APD Commander Mark Spangler, a citizen contacted police with very specific information about Paltauf's disappearance that led police to the tract of land. Police have used cadaver dogs to search the site, and the dogs have more than once hit on two specific areas where more than a dozen law enforcement personnel were working this morning. Among the information the tipster provided to police is that there could potentially be a body here buried in a shallow grave, Spangler said. This afternoon, police said they have not located any evidence. And as a matter of fact, we know that no evidence would be found at this location. And we get one more pretty disturbing piece of news from this article. In March 2008, Lewis Walls was charged with making a terroristic threat against his then estranged girlfriend, Cassandra Tolbert, after Walls allegedly told her that he wanted to get back together with her. When she said no, Tolbert said Walls whispered in her ear, "I don't want to kill you like I did that girl Roxanne. And I really did kill her. I know how to do something with bodies." He served some time for this. There was also a protective order put into place, which I believe he actually possibly breached as well. Just a lot going on around this guy. Over at KXAN.com, Rosa Paltauf, Roxanne's sister, says, Roxanne didn't just disappear off the street that night. Something happened to Roxanne, and someone knows what happened to her. She says police initially classified her sister as a runaway, which may have hurt the case. Quote, there's no evidence. They never looked in the hotel room that they were staying, Paltauf says. According to some of the videos I've seen, they did try to find the hotel room, but a couple things were working against them. First of all, they didn't check it until I believe it was about a week after the occurrence. And the second thing was apparently the bookkeeping at this hotel was so bad, they couldn't even tell what room she was in. Now, they believe that they were actually in room 217. They checked that room, but it had already been cleaned several times. There was other people that had already stayed there. So any evidence that would have been there obviously wasn't there any longer. Her boyfriend was never really cooperative, and we don't have any witnesses. We don't have any evidence, so we're kind of going on how we know Roxanne. She wouldn't just disappear, Rosa says. Detectives with the Missing Persons Unit say because this is still an open, active case, they cannot give more details. They do say they believe criminal activity was involved. I really wish they would release some details, if nothing else, just to get some press spinning around this and to elicit more tips, because it's pretty obvious to me that police are going to need public's help in terms of solving this. Someone out there has the information. I'm hoping that things like this video might get in front of that person. And if you are a person that has information in this case, in the description box below, right at the top, you're going to find all the contact information you need to reach out to Austin PD. If you're not comfortable doing that, you can anonymously contact Austin Crimestoppers. You don't have to tell them who you are. You can just pass along the information. So if you do have that info, please do the right thing. Please pass that information along. This family has waited far too long to know what has happened to Roxanne. Over at Fox 7 Austin, her sister Rosalind was just 15 when Roxanne disappeared. That's when it really hit me. When she wasn't there for my birthday, I thought, this is real. Will we be one of those families that will go years and years without knowing? Her mother, Elizabeth Harris, remembers details about Roxanne's personality that made her one of a kind. She was beautiful, not just the outside, but inside too. She loved and cared for people. She was selfless. She gave to others. She was truly like that, and it's what made her really special, said her mother. And another quote from her sister, Rosalind. Of course, I want to hope for the best for my sister Roxanne, but I would rather know than not know. Once you know, you can grieve, but being in limbo, you can't mourn. There's a missing link, said her mother. It's too easy, too solvable. She just disappeared and we can't find her. Somebody knows something, said Harris. I'm almost wishing that this could become one of those cases where one of these guys gets busted for something and offers up information on the other one, maybe in exchange for leniency or something like that. I think that I can't speak for the family, but I think if I was in their shoes, I would certainly go for getting the truth out, particularly if one of these guys could possibly flip on the other, which is just, it's another weird aspect to this case. I don't know why there seems to be this unified front between these two guys. But even just seeing the case that we saw with Lewis's former girlfriend and the way he spoke to her, I think it's pretty likely that someone out there has heard something about this case. You might be scared to get that information in. Like I said, use Crimestoppers. Do it anonymously. Just get this information in. This family really, really needs you to step up on this. So let's get a little more information here at austinchronicle.com. So this is a few friends of Roxanne's that were speaking and basically talking about, I've already told you a bit about what they said about their backstory, that it was a bit of a rough situation, on again, off again relationship. He was possibly pushing her around. So they have a theory, and it looks like Roxanne's mother agrees with them. They now insist they believe Roxanne was truly and finally done with the relationship. Ellis, that's one of her friends, called her the last weekend in June and caught Roxanne crying. Was there trouble with Walls, she asked. And she was like, I can't talk about it now. Ellis told Roxanne to get dressed and she would pick her up. Roxanne agreed. Ready to go, Ellis called back, but Roxanne never answered. Gonzalez, another friend of hers, says she had a similarly cryptic conversation on July 4th, 2006. She told me that they were arguing, she recalls. She was trying to leave him alone, but he wasn't letting her. I said, just leave, don't talk to him anymore. But you can only tell a person so much. So that's another thing I'm wondering about this case. We hear that there is an argument. What's the argument about? I have no idea. I haven't been able to find any detail on that. And this is pointing to the fact that maybe they could have been arguing for a number of days at this point. And was she really getting enough? Is there some possibility that she told him she wanted to end the relationship? I think that that's something that should be considered in this as well. The boyfriend, with a picture of Lewis with a very flattering hand gesture. Lewis, among his peers, is an idiot. That's a quote, according to 15-year APD veteran Detective James Scott, one of 2 investigators assigned to the department's missing persons detail. I mean, you can look at his criminal record and tell he's not the smartest criminal out there. In March 2005, he was popped for agreeing to sell 3 rocks of crack for $50 to an undercover APD officer. After testing, it turned out the crack was fake. In March 2008, he was charged with making a terroristic threat against his current girlfriend. That's the instance that we just talked about. He pleaded no contest to the charge, was found guilty, and sentenced to 140 days in jail. I've seen other information about his criminal history, a lot of marijuana possession charges, a couple of times where he's lying to officers about who he is. It's pretty extensive. It seems like this guy kind of gets hit for something at least every couple of years. So once again, I'm just really curious how we haven't had the right situation come forth where they could elicit some information from him about this particular case. But it seems like he might have a lot to hide. And apparently his ex-girlfriend that he threatened spoke to Roxanne's mother, and we get some disturbing information from here. She told Roxanne's mother that Walls had tried to pimp her out. Could it be, Harris wonders, that Walls tried the same thing with Roxanne? That's a possibility, says Detective Scott. I don't think she was straight out tricking for him, he says, but he could have been trying to groom her for that role. And it's weird because from the information I've seen, and I've seen some reporters that are way closer to this case talking about this, it does not seem that Roxanne herself was into any kind of drug use. We've talked about trafficking on the channel before. We've talked to experts in trafficking. There are a couple of standard control mechanisms that they use. Being a boyfriend, saying that you love someone is actually one of the control mechanisms. Being violent towards them is another one of these control mechanisms. We have 2 of those showing up here. Typically, money or a drug addiction could be the other control mechanisms. I don't know if we really see that in this case, but we've got 2 other pretty strong ones that it could be that he was trying to groom her to do that. Certainly a possibility. Now, here's the thing that really has me shaking my head. Austin Police Department's 2-man missing persons investigation team works roughly 4,000 cases each year. That's the thing I was talking about earlier in this video about why this case might not be having a lot of progress. 4,000 cases? That's ridiculous. Between 2 men? That means even if these guys were working every single day of the year, not taking off any weekends, not taking any vacation, between 2 guys, they would have to review more than 5 cases each per day with no weekends off, no vacation. That I can't imagine it. Even if they're working 10-hour days, they're giving each case 2 hours of work, and that's it for the year. You can't get back to that case until the following year. You can give it another 2 hours. And even then, you're getting new cases that are coming in. Admittedly, from the 4,000 cases, I'm sure many of these are solving themselves. You do have runaways that come back. You have children that go missing that are found. But just for the paperwork, just for them to fill out the intake form, to put it in the system, to do some type, think about what you can get done in 2 hours. I can tell you, just from working on this channel, if you guys asked me to do one of these episodes with only 2 hours of prep, it wouldn't happen. I can't do it. If there are any interviews that happen, one of those interviews could easily take 1 to 2 hours. Any type of looking into electronic records and all this kind of stuff, I mean, 2 hours is nothing. It's nothing. It just blows my mind that we have this kind of condition going on here where a police force has 2 guys dedicated to 4,000 cases that are occurring each year. How does that happen? Something is really, really wrong. I don't get it. I could barely keep up just reviewing, and I'm not going anywhere. I'm sitting here just primarily pumping the internet, reviewing 3 cases for you guys a week, and I can barely get enough information together to feel confident about me presenting these things to you. To think, am I really actively working those 4,000 cases that are happening each year? You know they're not. And that's where this prioritization comes into place where, okay, we've got a missing 6-year-old. Well, then all these other cases get bumped back one. And I do think that because of this, that's where we have that gap that happened at the start of this case. You know, we have a family that, first of all, isn't told about the fact that their daughter is missing for 20 hours, even if we buy his time frame, which I don't necessarily buy it. But at a minimum, 20 hours later, they learn that she's missing. They go and get the police. And I believe, even according to the detective himself, it was 3 days from when she went missing to where the police actually started responding to the case. It's not hard to understand when you're talking about this type of caseload. I just don't know how that's reasonable. How is that acceptable? It blows my mind. I really can't believe it. There has to be a better way. There has to be a better system for that. They should have some type of number set where it automatically pulls other employees into that department. No one person should be responsible for 2,000 cases a year. It's ridiculous. It wouldn't work for YouTube. I certainly can't imagine that it works for law enforcement. Over at khou.com, family seeks help in finding woman who disappeared 12 years ago in Austin. This is from July 9th, 2018. Every single year, her family is getting out there, putting up more posters, speaking to more people, trying to find where Roxanne is. On a rainy Saturday morning, Elizabeth Harris and her daughter, Rosalind Schultz, huddled underneath a white tent on Runberg Lane. Quote, "We're here to bring out awareness about my daughter, Roxanne, that she's been missing 12 years, her mother, Harris, said. We're out here every year just to remember her and to keep her memory alive, that we're still searching for her and we're still wanting the public's help to help us find her." And once again, if you have that info, please get it in. Fox7Austin.com. Missing Austin woman's family sets up GoFundMe to cover search efforts. Rosalind Schultz, Paltauf's sister, said, "Never in my life did I think we had to buy enough flyers to last 12 years. At the end of the day, no one else is going to advocate for her, and I want to bring her home. She deserves to be home with us, and we deserve to know what happened." And I certainly agree with that. In the description box below, right below the contact information, you're going to find a link to the GoFundMe. We can see they've got it pretty plainly stated here. The funds would be utilized for new flyers, new banner, new bumper stickers, and whatever else is needed, like food and water for the event at Patterson Park. We greatly appreciate everyone's support and prayers as we endure another year without our Roxanne. And we can see they raised $721 out of a $1,500 goal. On behalf of myself and my amazing supporters, thank you so much to my Patreon and PayPal supporters. We are going to make a donation to this just as soon as I'm done filming this today. I want to make sure that you guys are able to buy some more flyers to keep that going for as long as you need to. I'm just sorry that it's gone on this long and that you guys are having to plan next year's event. Also down below, you will find the official Facebook page, Missing Roxanne Elizabeth Paltauf, where you can check if you want to help participate maybe in next year's event. This is the rally point where you can find more information. In the sources down below, I will also have links to a Web Sleuths thread, a lot of information. It's kind of helpful because with this particular case, a lot of the older media has kind of fallen away. I really had trouble finding old news articles for this case. Luckily, that's one of the great things about Web Sleuths. Many times people are copying and pasting sections of those articles here, or they're at least talking about the details of those articles. This was really, really helpful. If you guys really want to dig into this case, I recommend you check this out. On top of that, there is a Reddit thread that you will find down below. And I do want to also conclude this segment of this episode of BrainScratch with another video. Let's check this out.
Roxanne, if you can hear us, just know that we love you very, very much. We've been searching for you for so long, and we're just trying to do anything we possibly can to bring you home back to us. We don't know what happened to you, and we need to find you. Our family's incomplete without you, and we love you with all our heart, and we'll go to the ends of the earth to find you.
Directly from her mother and sister, and I just want to once again say my heart goes out to the Paltauf family. I'm sorry that you guys are dealing with this. I'm sorry that it's been 12 years, and hopefully there's something we can do by continuing to raise exposure to this case. And by the way, you guys have been doing an amazing job raising exposure on this, and I am so impressed at everything that you guys have done, and the fact that you do it year after year after year. It's amazing. Please, please keep it up. All right, everyone. So now we're going to get to the comment review for last week's video. That was what I consider the old school brain scratch, the ghost blimp, about the L8 airship, the blimp that came back without her two-man crew. Many of you seem to appreciate it. As a matter of fact, let's start with the first comment here from James Roberts. It was these sorts of stories that first got me interested in the channel. I'm not saying that it is aliens, but it's aliens. Thank you so much, James. And I saw it from several of you. You guys really appreciated having one of the old school brain scratches thrown in there. I'll try to remember to do that a bit more often. It's always been my intent to keep those going. I know the focus of the channel has shifted considerably towards true crime, but those cases really interest me. So I will do my best to do them a little more often. I know I kind of took a bit of a break from those stories, but I'm hearing from so many of you that you appreciated it. So mental note made. I'll definitely try to do some more of those. Tapazili says, the only thing that I could come up with, especially in light of the drained battery, is that a random bolt of lightning or some type of electric anomaly struck the craft, rendering both men unconscious, possibly throwing them out of the craft. If they happened to still be in the craft before the drastic ascent that it took, it may have been at that time that while unconscious, they were thrown from the craft. That's kind of lining up with a theory I had when I was reviewing the information as well. The drained battery thing bothers me too much, and I can't believe that in terms of the investigation that they didn't look into that direction stronger. And that's one of the things I was considering, not that there was a lightning bolt, but that there was some type of short that had happened with the electrical systems that maybe could have been jolting them. Like literally maybe the actual control panel was shorting out and it was shocking them to touch it. They were worried about being able to control things. Maybe some part of the actual structure. I mean, it is all, I think it's all aluminum. But it's certainly some type of metal. I would figure it's probably conductive. I don't know. There's something about the batteries that really bothers me with that. The biggest thing that bothers me about this case is, at least from the photos I've seen of it restored in the museum, there is windows around all of it. And I would figure there would have to be, because they're probably flying through some pretty interesting storm elements in terms of being off of the West Coast, San Francisco area. I don't know if you could open any of those windows. It doesn't look like it from what I've seen in terms of at least the good picture I could see from the museum. I think your only way in and out of that craft is the door. So in any case where you have a situation where they're unconscious and something like that has occurred, that door has to get open somehow. And that's a really, really bizarre part of this story. Silhouettes by the Sea. Maybe they fell while trying to fix a problem that was a two-man job. I actually did run into some comments that were alluding to that as well before I shot the episode. What I'm curious about is, would they really have some method of doing a two-man job where they wouldn't notify ground control that there was some kind of problem with the craft where they would have to do that two-man job? It seems kind of too risky to me. I mean, why are you going to do something that is potentially, and that is the main theory I hear, is that some type of repair was needed to the exterior, and one man decided he was going to open the door and try to effect that repair. And in doing that, he calls for help from the other guy. They both fall out. I would think if there was any kind of thing that had gone wrong in terms of this craft, their first method of operation would have been to radio back, maybe deviate from their planned flight, try to get it back to base immediately. But even if they weren't going to do that, I think they would at least have to call in that there was some problem. And we don't have anything like that going on. I don't know if any of you out there are military. Please let me know if you think that that is a more reasonable assumption about those procedures. If there is something wrong with the vehicle you're in, is it a normal process to have to call that back in? I don't know. It's definitely an interesting thought. I believe this is Ricey 22. Let's assume they actually did make contact with, say, a Japanese submarine. Of course, the submarine would have to surface. One of the men in the blimp might have opened the door and tried to communicate with the sub using the external speaker. What if among the enemy crew happened to be a good marksman with a handgun? I'd say not even a handgun. What if they had a sniper down there? The man could have been shot and fallen out, leaving no marks of struggle or missile attack on the blimp. He could have pulled the speaker with him. I think he means the microphone for the speaker system. And that could have been left turned on, which may possibly account for the drained battery. That's a really good theory. That's a really, really interesting theory. As to the other man, he could have been pulled out by the dead weight of his colleague while trying to save him, or also shot and fallen out while trying to close the door. At this point, the blimp would be flying without crew, but with the suitcase still on board. I doubt they would have thrown it out straight into the enemy's hands. The speaker's still on, hanging and draining the battery, and the door open. As to the bodies of the men, they might have been snatched by the enemy crew to remove as much evidence of what happened as possible. Or maybe the men were still alive, only wounded, and the enemy wanted to interrogate them. Well, in any case, the truth is often stranger than fiction. Thank you so much for writing up that theory. I really, really appreciated reading it, and I really think there's some interesting thoughts there. In terms of them being shot, my first question would be, wouldn't there be some sign of that in the actual vehicle as well? I don't know. Now we're talking about distance. We're talking about how strong that bullet was. Is it possible that it could have entered the body but not exited the body? And then because of that, there was no ricochet that happened off the interior of the cabin or something like that. It's still a very, very interesting theory to me. And I really love that you addressed the battery situation. I'm looking for that answer. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me that everything was perfectly fine with this craft, but they dumped some fuel and the batteries were drained. Well, then is everything really fine, or is there something else going on here? And finally, we're going to end with a comment that's just a little off topic, but something I appreciate. Francine Genova, you know you've made it when Rob Dyke uses and gives credit for your material as a source. Congratulations. Rob Dyke, Dark Matters, the haunting last voicemail of Henry McCabe, uploaded to YouTube on Sunday, September 23rd, 2018. Thank you so much, Francine, and thanks to everyone else that let me know about that. It was pretty cool to watch that video and to see some of my work pop up there with that nice big credit. I really appreciate that they did that. So thank you so much to Rob and your production team over there. Take care, everyone. Have a nice weekend. I'll see you back here on Monday with a brand new BrainScratch Case Cracked.